Hi everyone, it's Vicky here, and today I'll be making a new layout on my art journal. So this is what I'll be making for you today, and one of the most common questions that I get is where can I find the supplies? So if you're watching on YouTube, just below the video there is a link to my blog. You can find all the supplies I'm using today there. So let's get started. So before I start, I always glue two pages together so that I have a harder page, a thicker page. Now I'm using my gel medium to do that, but you can go ahead and use any type of glue that you have on hand. As always, I'm working on my sketchbook Moleskine, and first of all I'm going to create a background. Now this is gesso. I have a lot of different types. This is from Faber-Castell, it's quite liquid, and the one that I'll be using today is from Ranger, and it's a bit thicker. I'm applying the gesso on my surface using a spatula, and that will make sure that I have a nice and textured background. Once I have applied both pages and the gesso is dry, I'll go ahead and decide the background color. Now I'm starting light here. I want my background to be blue, but I didn't quite know how blue I wanted the background to be in this stage. So I'm applying my distress paint, and I'm just spreading everything around with a wet baby wipe. And as I go, I'll start building up the color until I'm happy with how dark the blue is. Now that my background is dry, I'll go ahead and use a stencil to make my background more interesting. The stencil I'm using is by Tim Holtz, and it's called Honeycomb. I'm applying the ink using my blending tool, and the color I'm using is Salty Ocean. Now I could have used the bottle directly to apply the paint, but as the paint is quite juicy, I was afraid that I would make a big mess, like the paint would go under the stencil since it's so juicy, and I didn't want to do that. So just to be safe, I've used my applicator. So anyway, I'm just tearing off one of my palettes there, just to make sure that I won't make a mess of my previous art journal, and I'll go ahead and apply ink all over the edges of my layout. I'm using the Honeycomb because this layout that I'm creating today is about creativity, and us crafters are always working just like bees, always making something, so I thought that would be appropriate for a page like this. To add more interest on my background, I'm using one of my favorite stamps for the background. This is French text, and I'm just stamping here and there. I'm using Archival ink for the stamp that is blue and matches perfectly my background. As you can see, I don't try to make the best impression. On the contrary, I'm just trying to stamp here and there. I don't want a full coverage. And now I'll do some modeling paste. That you could also use embossing paste or whatever you have on hand. I just decided to use my modeling paste today. I'm using again one of the stencils by Tim Holtz. This is the Raise, and I'll just apply my modeling paste on top. I'm making sure that it's not too bulky, and I'm trying to make it as flat as possible, and there is a reason for that. I'm going to stick things on top, and I didn't want to have too rough of a surface. And since I have my modeling paste and my spatula out, I decided to add even more stenciling there. So I've used the splatters by Tim Holtz, and I'm adding some splatters and some coffee stains all over. When I'm done with stenciling, I have to clean up the stencils. So while I leave that to dry, I'll show you how I clean them up without having to leave my craft room. One of the things that I'm too lazy to do is leave the craft room in the middle of crafting and just go ahead and wash my stencils. So that's what I do. I just use my spatula to clean them up, and finally I wipe them off with a baby wipe, and they are just like new. And now it's time to do some die cutting. I'm using this cardstock by Ranger, and I'll just cut out these dies. These are bottles by the Sizzix and Tim Holtz collection, and I'll cut 4 of them. So I have to run my die twice. I'm keeping all the little pieces, and I just use a small bowl there, just because my crafting area tends to be messy and I don't want to lose any small pieces. Now I've chosen some colors, and I'm trying to create a rainbow palette there, and I'm just going to cover up these cardstock pieces with them, and then I'll also spray them with water. If you spray distress paint before it's dry with water, then the paint moves and creates a nice effect, which I love. And now I'll go ahead and do some more die cutting. I'm using this die, which is by Tim Holtz again, and it's called Honeycomb. And I'm going to cut out all those strips of paper that I have created. Now that I'm finished with die cutting, it's time to color the bottles. Now I decided first to go with pale colors, and I'm using these 3 colors to cover up my bottles. You can see that I'm only using 1 color on each bottle, and then spray it with water. That will make a nice effect. However, you'll see me later on that I will add even more color on top, because I decided that they were too pale. I'm using this stamp by Tim Holtz that adds a great texture, and I think it really helps the cork to look like a real cork. Now I'll go ahead and use distress ink all over the edges, but even though I added that, I also felt that they were again too pale. So you'll see what I'll do later on. And that's the point where I'm stacking one on top of the other that I realized they are too pale. So I decided to do something drastic, and I went ahead and add some red on top of the bottle, or green or orange, as you see. I've used my finger as a brush, and there is nothing better for a brush than your finger. Now I had these rub-on letters that I've used to write inspiration and ideas on those 2 little tags. These tags are also part of the bottles die. So now I'm using glossy accents on top of the bottles to make them look more realistic, as it will add shine and they will look like glass. And now to the fun part. Now that I'm finished with all the die cutting and coloring of the pieces, it's time to stick the bottles on top of my background. I'm using tacky glue at the back, and I'll stick them on my page. Now I'll make sure that they are off the bottom, and then I'll cut out whatever sticks out. I like how they shine, so I'm using my Tim Holtz scissors there, and I'll just cut out the excess. And part of my page is ready. This is the focal point after all. And now I'll go ahead and do some gluing. I'll actually going to stick down all those little pieces that I cut out from the honeycomb die, and you'll see that I'll be using my gel medium to stick them down. I'll try to create a mosaic of these as if they are coming out from the red bottle. Now if you take a look, the little blue pieces were too pale and they actually blend in with the background, so I went ahead and added a bit of darker color on top just to make sure that they stand out. And to add some highlights, I'm just dipping my finger on gesso, and I'm just adding a bit of gesso at the one corner of those little pieces. That's a very simple thing to do, and I'm also making sure to wipe off any excess with a baby wipe. And now it's time to stamp my quote. I'm using black archival ink, and these are all letters from Tim Holtz stamp sets. And my quote for today is, "You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you get." To finish off my layout, I'll be using my white gel pen and add some highlights on the letters of creativity. And just to remind you that you can find all the supplies that I've used today on my blog. If you're watching on YouTube, just make sure to find the link below the video in the description area. And I guess that was the layout for today. I hope you had fun and got inspired. And if you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and also leave me a comment. Thank you all for watching.